In the heart of Detroit, a city known for its roaring engines and towering factories, Marcus King stood as one of the most powerful men in the automotive industry. He was not just any CEO, he was the kind who made headlines every time he stepped into a room. With his sharp suits, commanding voice, and reputation for taking risks, Marcus had turned Titan Motors into a name that everyone recognized. People admired him, feared him, and sometimes even resented him, but no one could deny his influence. On this particular morning, Marcus decided to visit one of Titan's largest manufacturing plants. The facility buzzed with activity, machines, clanking, and workers moving quickly between stations. It was a place where raw metal transformed into sleek engines, the lifeblood of Titan Motors. But today, something felt off. The energy in the air seemed heavier than usual, and Marcus noticed it immediately as he walked through the doors. His arrival caused a stir among the employees. Some stopped what they were doing to catch a glimpse of the famous CEO, while others pretended to stay busy hoping not to draw attention. Marcus didn't care much for small talk or formalities. He wanted results, and he wanted them fast. That was why he was here, to inspect the progress on a new prototype engine that promised to revolutionize fuel efficiency. If successful, this engine would put Titan Motors ahead of its competitors and solidify Marcus's legacy as a visionary leader. As he moved deeper into the plant, accompanied by a group of managers and engineers, Marcus's eyes scanned the assembly lines. Everything appeared to be running smoothly until they reached the section dedicated to testing the prototype. There, chaos reigned. A large machine sat idle, surrounded by tools and scattered parts. Workers milled around, scratching their heads and exchanging worried glances. "What's going on here?" Marcus asked, his tone firm but calm. One of the engineers stepped forward nervously, clutching a clipboard. "Sir, we've encountered an issue with the prototype engine. It broke down during testing, and we're trying to figure out what went wrong." Marcus frowned. "How long has it been like this?" "About 2 hours, sir," the engineer replied, avoiding direct eye contact. "We're working as quickly as we can to resolve it." 2 hours. To Marcus, that was unacceptable. Every minute the engine remained broken meant delays in production, lost revenue, and potential damage to the company's reputation. His frustration began to simmer beneath the surface, though he kept his composure. Instead of yelling, which might have been his first instinct, Marcus decided to take a different approach. "Listen up," he said, raising his voice slightly so everyone nearby could hear. "I don't care how long you've been working on this or how complicated the problem is. What I need is someone who can fix it, right now. Is there anyone here willing to step up and get this engine back online within the next hour?" The room fell silent. Employees exchanged hesitant looks, unsure whether to volunteer or stay quiet. Fixing the engine under such pressure was a daunting task, especially with the CEO watching closely. Failure would mean embarrassment, maybe even consequences for their jobs. No one wanted to take the risk. Just when it seemed like no one would answer, a soft but steady voice spoke up from the back of the crowd. "I'll do it." All eyes turned toward the speaker. Standing there was Emily Carter, a young woman in her mid-20s with dark hair tied back in a ponytail and grease smudged on her hands. She wore the uniform of a logistics coordinator, not an engineer or technician. Her presence surprised everyone, including Marcus. "You?" Marcus said, raising an eyebrow. "And who exactly are you?" Emily took a deep breath before responding. "My name is Emily Carter. I work in logistics, but I've been around engines my whole life. My dad's been an operator here for over 20 years, and I've learned a lot from him." Marcus studied her for a moment. There was something about the way she carried herself, calm, confident, and unafraid, that intrigued him. Still, he couldn't help but feel skeptical. Logistics coordinators weren't supposed to know how to fix complex machinery. This was outside her job description, and yet here she was, offering to take on the challenge. "All right, Miss Carter," Marcus finally said, crossing his arms. "You've got 1 hour. If you can fix this engine, I'll make sure everyone knows your name, but if you fail—" He let the sentence trail off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. Emily nodded, undeterred by the weight of his words. She grabbed a pair of gloves from a nearby table and approached the broken engine. As she examined it, the rest of the room watched intently. Conversation ceased, and the only sounds came from the hum of distant machines and the occasional clink of metal against metal. For Emily, this wasn't just about proving herself to Marcus or saving face in front of her co-workers. It was personal. Growing up, she had spent countless weekends in her father's garage, learning how engines worked and helping him repair old cars. Those experiences had taught her more than just technical skills. They had instilled in her a deep respect for hard work and problem-solving. Now, standing in front of this massive machine, she felt a strange sense of familiarity. Despite the pressure, she believed she could rise to the occasion. As she began dismantling parts of the engine, Emily explained her thought process aloud. From what I can see, the timing belt is misaligned, which is causing friction in the camshaft. That's likely why it overheated and shut down. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the nerves she might have felt inside. The engineers standing nearby exchanged impressed glances. They hadn't considered the timing belt as the root cause, focusing instead on other components. Emily's insight showed a level of understanding that surpassed her role in the company. Marcus observed silently, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. He had expected Emily to falter under the pressure, but she handled herself with remarkable poise. Each movement she made was deliberate, each decision calculated. It was clear that she knew what she was doing. Meanwhile, Joe Carter, Emily's father, stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression a mix of pride and anxiety. He had always encouraged his daughter to pursue her interests, even when they veered away from traditional paths. Seeing her take charge in such a high-stakes situation filled him with both admiration and concern. What if she failed? What if Marcus held it against her? Time ticked away and the tension in the room grew thicker. 30 minutes passed, then 40. Emily worked tirelessly, her focus unwavering. She adjusted gears, tightened bolts, and realigned parts with precision. Sweat trickled down her forehead, but she barely noticed. All that mattered was getting the engine back to life. Finally, with less than 10 minutes left on the clock, Emily stepped back and signaled that she was done. "Okay, try starting it now," she said, wiping her hands on a rag. The lead engineer hesitated for a moment before flipping the switch. For a brief second, nothing happened. Then, with a low rumble, the engine sprang to life, humming smoothly, as if nothing had ever been wrong. Cheers erupted throughout the room, breaking the tension that had gripped everyone for the past hour. Emily allowed herself a small smile, relief washing over her. She had done it. Against all odds, she had fixed the engine and proven herself capable of handling the challenge. But as the applause continued, Marcus stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Well done, Miss Carter," he said, his voice carrying a note of genuine admiration. "You've earned your moment in the spotlight. But tell me, how did you know so much about engines? You're not an engineer, are you?" Emily met his gaze without hesitation. "No, I'm not. But knowledge doesn't always come from titles or degrees. Sometimes it comes from experience and passion, and I've had plenty of both." Her response lingered in the air, leaving Marcus and everyone else to reflect on the lesson behind her success. The room was alive with energy after Emily Carter successfully fixed the broken engine. Cheers echoed through the factory floor, and workers exchanged proud smiles. For a moment, it felt like a celebration. But as the noise began to die down, all eyes turned back to Marcus King. The CEO stood still, his hands in his pockets, studying Emily with an intensity that made her feel both respected and scrutinized. "Well," Marcus finally said, breaking the silence, "you've certainly earned your place in this story, Miss Carter. I'll admit I didn't expect you to pull it off." Emily nodded politely but didn't respond. She wasn't sure what Marcus was thinking, and she didn't want to guess. Her focus had been on fixing the engine, not impressing him or anyone else. Still, she couldn't deny the sense of satisfaction that came from proving herself in such a high-pressure situation. Marcus took a step closer to her, his curiosity evident. "You mentioned your father earlier. Joe Carter, right? He's been here for over 20 years? "Yes," Emily replied. "He works on the assembly line. You probably know him. He's one of the best operators we have. Marcus glanced around the room, spotting Joe standing quietly near the edge of the crowd. Joe looked uneasy, as if he wasn't sure whether to celebrate or worry about what might come next. Marcus gave him a brief nod before turning his attention back to Emily. "So, tell me more," Marcus said. "How did you learn so much about engines? Was it all from watching your dad?" Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure how much to share. She didn't want to sound boastful, but she also knew her knowledge hadn't come easily. It had taken years of hard work, late nights, and countless mistakes to get where she was today. "It wasn't just from watching my dad," she explained. "When I was younger, I used to help him in our garage. We'd take apart old cars and put them back together. At first, I didn't understand much. I just handed him tools and held things steady. But over time, I started learning how everything worked. By the time I was 16, I could rebuild an engine on my own." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "That's impressive. Most people wouldn't even try something like that at 16. What made you stick with it?" Emily thought about the question for a moment. "I guess it was because I loved it. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. Plus, my dad always encouraged me. He never treated me differently because I'm his daughter. If anything, he pushed me harder than anyone else." Marcus chuckled softly. "Sounds like Joe raised a fighter. I can respect that." As they spoke, the other employees began returning to their tasks, though many stole glances at Emily and Marcus. The buzz of conversation filled the air, and whispers spread quickly. Some praised Emily for her bravery and skill, while others wondered what would happen next. Would Marcus reward her, promote her, or would he simply move on, leaving her achievement as nothing more than a footnote? But Marcus wasn't done yet. He gestured for Emily to follow him, leading her away from the crowd and toward a quieter corner of the factory. Once they were out of earshot, he turned to face her again. "I have to ask," he said, his tone serious now. "Why didn't you say anything sooner? About the engine, I mean. You clearly knew what was wrong with it. Why wait until today to step up?" Emily's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. She had hoped this question wouldn't come up, but she should have known better. Marcus wasn't the kind of man to let things slide. "It's complicated," she admitted. "I've noticed issues with this prototype before. In fact, I've seen similar problems pop up in maintenance reports for months, but no one seemed to care. Or maybe they didn't notice. I tried mentioning it once or twice, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "But," Marcus prompted. "But I didn't think anyone would listen to me," Emily finished. "I'm not an engineer. I don't have a fancy degree or title. To most people, I'm just the logistics coordinator. I figured if I kept quiet and did my job, someone higher up would eventually catch the problem. Clearly that didn't happen." Her honesty struck a chord with Marcus. He had always prided himself on being a hands-on CEO, someone who understood the inner workings of his company. Yet hearing Emily talk about systemic failures and realizing he hadn't noticed them made him feel uneasy. Had he become too disconnected from the day-to-day operations of his own business? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of machinery in the background provided a steady rhythm, filling the silence between them. Finally, Marcus broke the quiet. "You're right," he said, surprising Emily. "If someone like you has been seeing these problems for months, then we've got bigger issues than just a broken engine. This isn't just about today, it's about how we operate as a company." Emily blinked, caught off guard by his candor. She hadn't expected Marcus to agree with her so openly. Most executives would have brushed off her concerns or blamed someone else for the oversight. But Marcus seemed genuinely troubled by what she had revealed. "What do you think we should do about it?" he asked, his voice softer now. "You've seen these issues firsthand. What would you change?" Emily hesitated. She hadn't anticipated being asked for advice, especially not by the CEO of Titan Motors. But as she thought about it, ideas began to form in her mind. Slowly, she started speaking. "I think communication is key," she said. "Right now, there's a gap between the people on the ground, the operators, technicians, and coordinators, and the people making decisions upstairs. We see problems every day, but we don't always have a way to report them or make sure they're addressed. If there were better systems in place, like regular meetings or anonymous feedback channels, it might help bridge that gap. Marcus listened intently, nodding along. Go on. And transparency, Emily continued. Employees need to feel like their voices matter. When someone speaks up about a problem, they shouldn't have to worry about being ignored or punished. Trust goes both ways. If the company trusts its workers to speak honestly, then workers will trust the company to act on their input. By the time she finished, Marcus looked thoughtful. He had spent years building Titan Motors into a powerhouse, but he realized now that success wasn't just about profits and innovation. It was also about creating an environment where everyone felt valued and heard. You've given me a lot to think about, Marcus said after a pause. Thank you for sharing your perspective, Miss Carter. I appreciate your honesty. Emily nodded, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. She had spoken her mind, but she wasn't sure what impact her words would have. Would Marcus actually follow through on her suggestions? Or would this conversation fade away like so many others before it? Before either of them could say more, a voice interrupted them. It was Joe Carter, approaching cautiously with a nervous smile. Everything okay here? He asked, looking between Marcus and Emily. I hope I didn't cause any trouble by teaching her too much. Marcus laughed, a genuine sound that surprised everyone within earshot. On the contrary, Mr. Carter, your daughter has done us all a great service today. I should thank you for raising such a talented young woman. Joe's cheeks flushed with pride, and he glanced at Emily with a look of admiration. She's always been smart and determined. I just gave her a little guidance. Well, your guidance paid off, Marcus said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to think about some changes around here. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily and Joe alone. As soon as he was out of sight, Joe turned to his daughter. Are you okay? Did you get yourself into trouble? Emily smiled, shaking her head. No, Dad. I think I might have actually helped. Joe studied her for a moment, then pulled her into a hug. I'm proud of you, kiddo. Always have been. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Emily. Workers stopped by her desk to congratulate her, and managers gave her approving nods as they passed. Even though she returned to her usual duties in logistics, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had changed, not just for her, but for the entire company. Later that evening, as Emily drove home, she replayed the events of the day in her mind. Fixing the engine had been challenging, but it was the conversations afterward that stayed with her. She had spoken truth to power, and instead of dismissing her, Marcus had listened. Whether or not he acted on her suggestions remained to be seen, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt hopeful. Little did she know, Marcus was already planning his next move. Back at his office, he sat at his desk, staring at a blank sheet of paper. On it, he began jotting down notes about improving communication, empowering employees, and fostering trust. He knew implementing these changes wouldn't be easy, but he also knew they were necessary. As the sun set over Detroit, casting golden light across the city skyline, two very different people, one a billionaire CEO, the other a logistics coordinator, found themselves united by a shared vision. Both wanted to create a better future for Titan Motors, and both believed it was possible, if only they could work together. The next morning, Emily Carter woke up with a sense of anticipation she couldn't quite explain. The events of the previous day still felt surreal. Fixing the engine, speaking candidly to Marcus King, and watching her father beam with pride. She had gone to bed wondering if anything would actually change or if it had all been a fleeting moment of recognition. But as she prepared for work, something told her that this wasn't over yet. When Emily arrived at the factory, things seemed different. Workers greeted her warmly, some even clapping her on the back as she walked by. It was strange but nice to be recognized after years of quietly doing her job behind the scenes. Still, she reminded herself not to get too caught up in the attention. Her goal had never been fame. It was simply to do good work and maybe make a difference along the way. As she settled into her desk in the logistics department, Emily noticed an email waiting for her. The subject line read, "Meeting request. Marcus King." Her heart skipped a beat. Why would Marcus want to meet with her again? Was he upset about what she'd said? Or worse, had he decided to ignore her suggestions entirely? Before she could overthink it, another message popped up. A calendar invite confirming the meeting for later that afternoon. There were no details. Beyond the time and location, Marcus's private office on the executive floor. Emily took a deep breath and tried to focus on her tasks for the day, though her mind kept drifting back to the upcoming conversation. Meanwhile, Marcus King sat in his spacious office, staring out the window at the sprawling factory below. His mind raced with thoughts about Emily's words from the day before. Communication gaps, lack of transparency, employees feeling unheard. These weren't small problems. They were systemic issues that had likely been festering for years. And yet until now he hadn't seen them clearly. Marcus prided himself on being a leader who stayed connected to his company's operations. But hearing Emily speak so frankly made him realize how much he had missed. He thought about all the meetings he attended, the reports he reviewed, and the decisions he made without ever stepping foot on the factory floor. How many other voices like Emily's had gone unheard? Determined to make a change, Marcus spent the morning drafting plans for a new initiative. He called it Tighten Together, a program designed to improve communication and collaboration across departments. The idea was simple: create regular forums where employees at every level could share their insights, concerns, and ideas directly with management. No filters, no barriers, just honest dialogue. But Marcus knew he couldn't implement such a big shift alone. He needed someone who understood the realities of working on the ground, someone like Emily Carter. That's why he had invited her to meet with him today. He wanted to hear more of her thoughts and perhaps ask for her help in shaping the program. At exactly 2 p.m., Emily knocked on the door of Marcus's office. Her palms were sweaty, and her stomach churned with nerves. When Marcus opened the door and welcomed her inside, she forced herself to smile and act confident. "Thank you for coming, Miss Carter," Marcus said, gesturing for her to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "I hope I didn't pull you away from anything important." "No, sir," Emily replied, taking a seat. "Just routine logistics stuff, nothing urgent." Marcus nodded and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Good. Now let's cut to the chase. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday, about the gaps in communication and the challenges you mentioned. I agree with you. We need to do better." Emily blinked, surprised by his directness. "You do?" "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "And I'm ready to take action. I've started outlining a plan to address these issues, but I need your input. You've seen firsthand how things operate on the ground. If we're going to fix what's broken, I need your perspective." Emily felt a mix of emotions: pride, excitement, and a touch of disbelief. This was the last thing she had expected when she walked into the room. I'm honored, Mr. King, but why me? There are plenty of people here who know more than I do." Marcus shook his head. "That's not true. Knowledge isn't just about titles or degrees. It's about experience. And you've proven that you have both. Besides, you're not afraid to speak your mind. That's exactly the kind of person I need right now." For a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. She had always admired Marcus from afar, seeing him as untouchable and larger than life. But sitting here now talking to him as an equal, she realized he was just a man trying to lead the best way he knew how. Flawed, yes, but willing to learn. "All right," she finally said. "I'll help however I can." Marcus smiled, looking genuinely relieved. "Thank you, Miss Carter. Let's start by discussing your ideas. What would you prioritize if you were in my shoes?" Over the next hour, Emily shared everything she had observed during her time at Titan Motors. She talked about the frustrations workers faced when reporting problems that went ignored, the lack of clear channels for feedback, and the growing disconnect between upper management and the factory floor. She also suggested practical solutions, like setting up anonymous suggestion boxes, holding monthly town hall meetings, and assigning mentors to guide new employees. Marcus listened intently, jotting down notes as she spoke. Occasionally, he asked questions or offered his own thoughts, turning their discussion into a collaborative brainstorming session. By the end of the meeting, they had outlined the foundation of what would become the Tighten Together program. "You've given me a lot to work with," Marcus said as they wrapped up. "This is going to take time and effort, but I believe we can make a real difference. Would you be willing to stay involved as we move forward?" Emily hesitated. On one hand, she was excited to contribute to meaningful change. On the other hand, she worried about overstepping her role. "Are you sure? I mean, I'm happy to help, but I don't want to step on anyone's toes." Marcus chuckled. "Don't worry about that. If anything, I think people will appreciate having someone like you leading the charge. You've already earned their respect." Emily nodded slowly, feeling a spark of determination ignite within her. If she could use this opportunity to create a better workplace for everyone, then she owed it to herself and to her colleagues to try. Later that week, Marcus announced the launch of the Tighten Together program during a company-wide meeting. Standing on a platform overlooking the factory floor, he explained the initiative and its goals. Then, to everyone's surprise, he introduced Emily as one of the key contributors. "This young woman stepped up when no one else did," Marcus said, gesturing toward Emily. "She reminded us all of the importance of listening, not just to machines but to each other. Moving forward, she'll be helping us build stronger connections across the company." The crowd erupted into applause, and Emily felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She hadn't expected to be put in the spotlight like this, but she couldn't deny the sense of pride swelling in her chest. As the days turned into weeks, Emily threw herself into the project. She worked closely with Marcus and a team of managers to design feedback systems, organize training sessions, and plan the first town hall meeting. At first, some employees were skeptical, unsure whether the changes would stick. But as they saw tangible improvements like faster responses to maintenance requests and clearer communication about company goals, they began to trust the process. Even Joe Carter noticed the shift. One evening, as he and Emily sat together, at the kitchen table, he looked at her with a proud smile. "You're really making a difference, kiddo. People are talking about how things are getting better around here." Emily shrugged modestly. "I'm just doing my part. None of this would have happened without Marcus listening and taking action." Joe nodded. "Still, don't sell yourself short. Sometimes it takes courage to speak up, and even more courage to keep going when others doubt you." Emily thought about her father's words long after he went to bed. She realized he was right. Change didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't come easily. But with persistence, teamwork, and a little faith, anything was possible. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Emily felt hopeful about the future, not just for herself, but for everyone at Titan Motors. For the first time in a long time, she believed they were heading in the right direction. Months had passed since the launch of the Tighten Together program, and the changes were beginning to take root. The factory floor buzzed with a new energy, one that felt lighter, more collaborative, and less burdened by frustration. Employees, who once hesitated to speak up, now eagerly shared their ideas during town hall meetings. Managers listened intently, jotting down notes and following up on suggestions. Slowly but surely, Titan Motors was transforming, not just as a company, but as a community. Emily Carter found herself at the center of this transformation. Her role had expanded beyond logistics coordination. She was now officially part of the team leading the Tighten Together initiative. Marcus King had given her a new title, Director of Operational Excellence, and tasked her with overseeing the program's implementation. It was a daunting responsibility, especially for someone who had never held a leadership position before, but Emily embraced it with determination. Every day brought new challenges and opportunities. She spent hours meeting with workers from different departments, gathering feedback and identifying areas for improvement. She worked closely with engineers, operators, and managers to streamline processes and eliminate inefficiencies. And she made sure everyone's voice was heard, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant their contribution might be. At first, some employees were skeptical about Emily's sudden rise. They wondered if she was truly qualified for such an important role, or if she had simply been handed the position because of her connection to Marcus. But as they saw her dedication and the tangible results of her efforts, those doubts began to fade. Emily proved herself through her actions, not her title. One crisp autumn morning, Emily stood in front of a large crowd gathered in the factory's main assembly area. Today marked the 6th monthly town hall meeting, a tradition that had quickly become a cornerstone of the Tighten Together program. Workers filled the space, sitting on chairs or standing along the edges, eager to participate in the discussion. Marcus King joined Emily on the platform, his presence lending weight to the event. Though he rarely spoke during these meetings, his attendance signaled his commitment to the initiative. As Emily stepped up to the microphone, the room fell silent. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her stomach. "Thank you all for being here today. These meetings are a chance for us to come together, share our thoughts, and work toward solutions as a team. So let's dive in." Over the next hour, employees took turns sharing their concerns and ideas. Some talked about equipment malfunctions that needed urgent attention. Others suggested ways to improve safety protocols or reduce waste. Each speaker was met with respectful listening, and Emily ensured that every comment was recorded for follow-up. Toward the end of the meeting, a young technician named Alex raised his hand. When Emily called on him, he stood up hesitantly, clutching a clipboard. "I just want to say thank you," Alex said, his voice trembling slightly. "Before this program started, I didn't think anyone cared about what we had to say. But now I feel like my opinion matters, like I'm actually part of something bigger than myself." The room erupted into applause, and Emily smiled warmly. Moments like this reminded her why she had taken on the challenge in the first place. Change wasn't easy, but seeing its impact on people's lives made every struggle worthwhile. After the meeting ended, Marcus approached Emily as she packed up her notes. "You're doing incredible work, Miss Carter," he said, his tone sincere. "I can see the difference you're making, not just in operations but in morale. People trust you." Emily nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "It's not just me, sir. Everyone is working together. This isn't my success, it's ours." Marcus chuckled softly. "Don't sell yourself short. Leadership is about inspiring others to do their best, and that's exactly what you're doing." As they walked back to the office, Emily reflected on how far she had come. Just a year ago, she had been an ordinary logistics coordinator, quietly, going about her duties without much thought of stepping into the spotlight. Now she was helping shape the future of one of the largest automotive companies in the country. It was a journey she never could have predicted, but one she wouldn't trade for anything. Despite the progress, there were still moments of doubt. Late one evening, as Emily sat alone in her office reviewing reports, she couldn't shake a nagging sense of uncertainty. Were they moving fast enough? Was the program sustainable in the long term? What if things went back to the way they were once the initial excitement wore off? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Looking up, she saw Joe Carter standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use a break," he said, handing her one of the cups. "You've been burning the midnight oil again." Emily accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thanks, Dad. I guess I didn't realize how late it had gotten." Joe took a seat across from her desk, studying her face. "You look tired, kiddo. What's on your mind?" Emily sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough. Things are better now, but will they stay that way? Or are we just putting a Band-Aid on bigger problems?" Joe sipped his coffee thoughtfully before responding. "Change takes time, Emily. You can't fix everything overnight. But look at what you've already accomplished. People are happier. Communication is better, that's not nothing. But what if it's not enough?" Emily pressed. "What if we lose momentum? What if people stop caring?" Joe set his cup down and leaned forward, his expression serious. "Listen to me. You can't control everything. All you can do is give your best and hope others follow your lead. Trust the process and trust yourself. You've already proven that you're capable of great things." His words resonated deeply with Emily. She realized she had been so focused on the big picture that she hadn't stopped to appreciate the smaller victories along the way. Yes, there was still work to be done, but progress was progress, no matter how incremental. The following week, Emily decided to celebrate one of those small victories. During a routine inspection of the assembly line, she noticed that productivity levels had reached an all-time high. Machines ran smoothly, errors were minimal, and workers moved with efficiency and purpose. It was proof that the changes they had implemented were paying off. That afternoon, Emily gathered her team for an impromptu meeting. Standing in front of them, she clapped her hands to get their attention. "I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge something amazing," she said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "Thanks to all of your hard work, we've hit a major milestone. Productivity is higher than it's ever been, and it's because each of you has embraced the changes we've made. Thank you for believing in this program and in yourselves." The team cheered, their faces lighting up with pride. For many of them, this was the first time they had been directly recognized for their contributions. It was a reminder that their efforts mattered, and that they were valued members of the Titan Motors family. As the celebration wrapped up, Marcus appeared in the doorway, observing the scene with a satisfied smile. He caught Emily's eye and gave her a subtle nod of approval. In that moment, she knew they were on the right path. By the end of the year, the Titan Together program had become a model for other companies in the industry. Articles were written about Titan Motors' innovative approach to workplace culture, and executives from rival firms visited the factory to learn from their example. Marcus King was praised for his bold decision to embrace change, but he always credited Emily for her vision and leadership. For Emily, the journey had been life-changing. She had discovered strengths she never knew she had, and forged connections with people she might otherwise never have met. Most importantly, she had learned that true leadership wasn't about power or authority. It was about serving others and empowering them to succeed. As she looked around the factory one evening, watching workers laugh and collaborate seamlessly, Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had come so far, and yet she knew this was only the beginning. There would always be challenges ahead, but with teamwork and trust, anything was possible. And so, under the glow of fluorescent lights and the hum of machinery, Emily Carter stood tall, ready to face whatever the future held. A year had passed since Emily Carter first stepped forward to fix the broken engine, and Titan Motors was unrecognizable from the company it once was. The Titan Together program had become more than just an initiative. It was a way of life. Workers no longer hesitated to share their ideas or report problems. Managers actively sought feedback, knowing that collaboration led to better results. Productivity soared, morale reached new heights, and the factory hummed with a sense of purpose that hadn't existed before. Emily herself had grown into her role as Director of Operational Excellence. She no longer doubted her ability to lead or questioned whether she belonged in such a prominent position. Instead, she embraced the challenges that came with her job, finding joy in solving problems and helping others succeed. Her confidence inspired those around her, and she became a mentor to many young employees who looked up to her as a role model. Marcus King also noticed the difference, not just in the company but in himself. Leading Titan Motors had always been about ambition and innovation for him, but working alongside Emily had taught him the value of humility and listening. He realized that success wasn't measured solely by profits or market share. It was also about creating an environment where people felt valued and empowered. For the first time in years, Marcus felt connected to his workforce, and it showed in the decisions he made. One crisp spring morning, Marcus called Emily to his office. When she arrived, he gestured for her to sit down, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I've been thinking," Marcus began, leaning back in his chair. "The changes we've made here, they're not just benefiting us. They're setting an example for the entire industry. Other companies are starting to take notice." Emily nodded, though she wasn't sure where this conversation was going. "That's great news, sir. It means we're doing something right." "Yes, it does," Marcus agreed. "But I think it's time we shared our story with a wider audience. People need to hear what you've accomplished here, not just for Titan Motors, but for everyone else trying to build stronger workplaces." Emily frowned slightly. You mean, like a presentation or maybe an article? Something bigger, Marcus said, his eyes lighting up. I've been invited to speak at a leadership conference next month, one of the biggest in the country. Executives from all over will be there, eager to learn how to improve their own organizations. I want you to join me. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Me? At a national conference, are you sure? Absolutely, Marcus replied without hesitation. This isn't just my story, it's yours. You're the one who saw the gaps, spoke up, and helped turn things around. If anyone deserves to tell this story, it's you. For a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. Public speaking wasn't something she had ever imagined doing. The thought of standing on stage in front of hundreds of people made her palms sweat. But at the same time, she couldn't deny the opportunity to inspire others. If sharing their journey could help even one person make positive changes in their workplace, then it would be worth it. I'll do it, she finally said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. But I might need some help preparing. Marcus smiled. Don't worry, we'll work together. And remember, you already have everything you need. Just be yourself. Over the next few weeks, Emily threw herself into preparing for the conference. She worked closely with Marcus to craft a speech that highlighted the struggles and triumphs of the past year. They included anecdotes about fixing the engine, launching the Tighten Together program, and overcoming resistance along the way. They emphasized the importance of communication, trust, and teamwork, using real-life examples to illustrate their points. Joe Carter played a key role too, offering advice whenever Emily felt overwhelmed. Just talk like you're having a conversation, he told her one evening as they practiced at home. Pretend you're telling your story to a friend. That's when you're at your best. By the time the conference rolled around, Emily felt as prepared as she could be. Still, as she stood backstage waiting for her turn to speak, her stomach churned with anxiety. The auditorium was packed with executives, journalists, and industry leaders, all waiting to hear insights from the most influential minds in business. When Marcus introduced her, the crowd erupted into applause. Emily took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked onto the stage. The bright lights blinded her momentarily, but as she looked out at the sea of faces, she remembered Joe's advice. This wasn't about impressing strangers. It was about sharing her truth. Good afternoon, she began, her voice calm and clear. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm the Director of Operational Excellence at Titan Motors. A year ago, I was just another employee, a logistics coordinator who loved engines and believed in hard work. But one day I found myself facing a challenge that changed everything. As she spoke, Emily recounted the events that had brought her to this moment. She talked about fixing the broken engine, speaking honestly to Marcus, and working tirelessly to implement the Tighten Together program. She described the obstacles they had faced, skepticism, resistance, and moments of doubt, and explained how they had overcome them through persistence and teamwork. The lesson I've learned, Emily continued, is that change starts with listening. It starts with recognizing that every voice matters, no matter where it comes from. When we create spaces where people feel safe to share their ideas, we unlock potential we never knew existed. The audience listened intently, hanging on her every word. By the time she finished, the room erupted into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping as if they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes as she stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed by the response. Afterward, dozens of attendees approached her to shake her hand or ask questions. Some thanked her for inspiring them to try similar initiatives in their own companies. Others simply wanted to express admiration for her courage and determination. For the first time, Emily truly understood the impact of her story, not just on Titan Motors, but on countless others who might follow in their footsteps. Back at the factory, news of Emily's success spread quickly. Workers gathered around, screens to watch recordings of her speech, cheering whenever she mentioned their efforts. Even those who hadn't attended the conference felt a renewed sense of pride in being part of Titan Motors. Their little corner of Detroit had become a beacon of hope for the entire industry. Marcus watched the reactions with quiet satisfaction. He had always believed in Emily's potential, but seeing her shine on such a grand stage filled him with pride. "You've done something extraordinary," he told her later that week. "Not just for this company, but for the world." Emily smiled, shaking her head modestly. "We did it together. None of this would have happened without everyone's hard work, including yours." Marcus chuckled. "Still deflecting credit? I see. That's one of the things I admire most about you." In the months that followed, Titan Motors continued to thrive. The Titan Together program evolved, incorporating new ideas and strategies based on feedback from employees. Emily remained at the helm, guiding the company toward even greater heights while mentoring the next generation of leaders. Her story became a symbol of resilience and integrity, reminding people everywhere that meaningful change often begins with ordinary individuals willing to speak up. For Emily, the journey had been transformative. She had started as a quiet logistics coordinator with a passion for engines and ended up as a trailblazer whose influence reached far beyond the factory floor. But more importantly, she had stayed true to herself, humble, determined, and committed to making a difference. As she stood on the factory floor one evening, watching workers collaborate seamlessly and machines run smoothly, Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had helped create something special, a workplace built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. And though challenges would always arise, she knew they could face them together. Under the glow of fluorescent lights and the hum of machinery, Emily Carter smiled, ready to embrace whatever the future held.